Welcome to ISO 14001 Lead Auditor. In the next few minutes, we'll walk through everything you need to know about leading certification audits for environmental management systems. From understanding environmental aspects and legal compliance through planning and conducting third-party audits, managing audit teams, and writing certification recommendations. Whether you're pursuing Lead Auditor certification or preparing to lead your first environmental audit, this overview gives you the complete picture. Let's get started. Let's start with understanding what makes environmental auditing unique and what competencies a lead auditor needs beyond general audit skills. If you come from an ISO 9001 quality auditing background, understanding the differences with environmental auditing is essential. Quality auditing under ISO 9001 focuses on meeting customer requirements and ensuring product conformity. Evidence comes from production records, test results, and customer satisfaction data. Risks are primarily commercial, including defects, delivery failures, and customer loss. The regulatory framework varies by sector and is often voluntary beyond basic product safety. Environmental auditing under ISO 14001 focuses on environmental impacts, legal compliance, and pollution prevention. Evidence comes from emissions monitoring data, waste transfer records, environmental permits, and direct site observations. Risks include regulatory penalties, site contamination, and community harm. Critically, the regulatory framework is extensive, mandatory, and can carry criminal liability for noncompliance. Let's define the environmental concepts every lead auditor must master to audit an EMS effectively. An environmental aspect is an element of your activities, products, or services that interacts with the environment. It is the cause, not the effect. For example, burning fuel is the aspect. Air pollution is the impact. The lead auditor must verify that the organization has identified all significant aspects and established controls for them. A significant environmental aspect is one that has or can have a significant environmental impact, determined through evaluation criteria the organization defines. These criteria typically include scale of impact, severity, frequency, regulatory sensitivity, and stakeholder concern. The lead auditor must verify that the evaluation criteria are appropriate and consistently applied. Compliance obligations include all legal requirements such as environmental permits, emission limits, waste disposal regulations, and reporting requirements, plus voluntary commitments the organization has made. The lead auditor must verify that the organization has identified all applicable obligations, evaluated compliance, and can demonstrate conformity. The life cycle perspective requires organizations to consider environmental impacts beyond their own operations, from raw material acquisition through end of life of their products. The lead auditor verifies that this perspective influences design decisions, procurement specifications, and operational controls, not just that it appears in a policy statement. Now let's cover the practical aspects of planning and conducting an ISO 14001 certification audit, focusing on what makes environmental audits unique. Environmental certification audits must thoroughly examine these critical areas. Environmental aspects identification is the foundation of the EMS. The lead auditor must verify that the methodology captures all activities, products, and services, that significance evaluation criteria are appropriate and consistently applied, and that operational controls exist for every significant aspect. Common nonconformities include incomplete identification, inconsistent significance criteria, and missing controls. Legal compliance is the highest risk area in environmental auditing. Verify that the organization maintains a current register of all environmental obligations, conducts systematic compliance evaluations at planned intervals, holds valid permits and licenses, and can demonstrate compliance with specific conditions. Common findings include outdated legal registers, no systematic evaluation process, and expired permits. Operational controls must be implemented in practice, not just documented. The lead auditor verifies through site observation that controls for significant aspects are actually working, emergency preparedness procedures have been tested, and monitoring equipment is calibrated. Common findings include procedures that exist on paper but are not followed on the shop floor. Continual improvement in environmental performance is a core requirement. The lead auditor looks for evidence that objectives and targets are challenging and evolving, performance data shows improving trends, and management reviews result in concrete decisions and resource allocation. A common finding is organizations that set the same objectives year after year without progress. The site visit is where environmental auditing differs most from other management system audits. Here is the typical flow. Start with document review before going on site. Examine the environmental aspects register for completeness, the legal register for currency, environmental permits for validity and conditions, monitoring and measurement records for trends, and incident and near-miss reports. This preparation identifies the areas to focus on during the site walkthrough. The site walkthrough is critical for environmental audits. Physically observe operations that generate significant aspects. Inspect storage areas for chemicals and hazardous materials. Check emissions points and monitoring equipment. Observe waste segregation and handling practices, and examine drainage systems and potential contamination pathways. What you see on site often tells a different story than the documents. Interview people at all levels. Ask operators how they handle spills, what they do with waste, and whether they know the environmental significance of their work. Interview the environmental manager about compliance evaluation and regulatory changes. Talk to emergency responders about drill frequency and lessons learned. Interview contractors about environmental requirements communicated to them. Synthesize evidence from all three sources. Do documents match what you observed on site? Do interview responses align with documented procedures? Are monitoring records consistent with what you saw at emission points? Discrepancies between documents, observations, and interviews are where nonconformities are found. Present your synthesis at the closing meeting with clear evidence trails. ISO 14001 lead auditors need specific competencies beyond general audit skills. Environmental lead auditors need foundational knowledge of environmental science. You must understand how pollutants move through air, water, and soil, how activities impact ecosystems and biodiversity, the fundamentals of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, and resource depletion concepts. This knowledge enables you to evaluate whether the organization's aspect identification and impact assessment are adequate. Knowledge of environmental law is essential because noncompliance can result in criminal prosecution. You must understand how environmental permits work and their typical conditions, emission and discharge limit frameworks, waste classification and disposal regulations, and mandatory environmental reporting requirements. You do not need to be a lawyer, but you must recognize when compliance is questionable. Technical knowledge enables you to evaluate whether controls are appropriate and effective. Understand common environmental monitoring methods and their limitations, pollution prevention and treatment technologies, best available techniques for key industrial sectors, and energy and resource efficiency practices. This helps you distinguish between adequate controls and inadequate ones. Audit leadership skills are the same as for any lead auditor role. Manage your audit team effectively. Communicate findings diplomatically to sometimes defensive auditees. Exercise professional judgment when evidence is ambiguous, and write clear, evidence-based reports that drive corrective action rather than just documenting problems. Let's close with the most important lessons for ISO 14001 lead auditors. First, environmental auditing carries higher stakes than many other management system audits. Environmental noncompliance can result in criminal prosecution, significant fines, site remediation costs, and reputational damage. The lead auditor's assessment of compliance obligations must be thorough and evidence-based. Second, the site walkthrough is where environmental audits are won or lost. Documents may show perfect compliance, but the site tells the real story. Leaking containers, improper waste segregation, disabled monitoring equipment, and uncontrolled drainage are all found through physical observation, not document review. Third, environmental aspects identification is the foundation of the entire EMS. If the organization has not identified all significant aspects, the controls, objectives, and monitoring built on that identification are incomplete. Verify the methodology is comprehensive and captures normal operations, abnormal conditions, and emergency situations. And fourth, the life cycle perspective is a key requirement of the 2015 edition. The lead auditor must verify that this perspective genuinely influences procurement decisions, product design, and supplier management, not just that it appears as a statement in the environmental policy. Look for evidence of life cycle thinking in actual business decisions. That wraps up our overview of ISO 14001 lead auditing. In the full Udemy course, you'll get detailed lessons on every aspect of environmental certification auditing, practical checklists for every clause and key environmental topic, real-world audit scenarios covering manufacturing, services, and construction, and preparation for lead auditor certification examinations. Use the course to launch or advance your career as an environmental management system lead auditor. Thank you for watching. If you found this overview helpful, subscribe to the channel for more content, and check the description for the link to the full course. See you in the next video.